Thanks for joining me. I wanted to share something that I feel would add clarity and perspective to this conversation.
So we're going to, all right, so we're going to delve right in. The first question.
Yeah.
Do our people call themselves black, or is it an act of subjugation, culture, racial, or slash culture genocide? Once again, do our people call themselves black, or is it an international law act of subjugation, culture, racial, culture, and culture genocide?
All right. First we got two issues there. We got one issue of the etymon, which is the etymology of the word. Then you have the issue of the social engineering operations. Then you have the issue of Romanus Pontifex, from which the motive comes, and dum diversus unum sanctum. And so this is, again, even with the value of the research that you've done over the years, and also you presenting not only Moors and Masonry, but also your other books. Because most of the people, when they look at the different areas of the human condition by the training operations of the people who have controlled the operations here, they look at things as separate, and you have to look at it all. And this is the question arises from a disconnect between ancient and modern history and geography and anthropology, inclusive of etymology. And also this is relative to, from the social engineering perspective, why those who have been occupying our land and occupying the people separate them as subject matters, because they would be self-explanatory, as an example. So we know that the word, number one, that the word black is Middle English. And so therefore, when we look into the linguistic structure, we know we're dealing around 1150 area to 1700s in that area in general. And that's derived from Old High German, which actually means white spot, pale colors, etc. So we already know not only is it an adjective, it has no bio application. So that's self-explanatory. So then we have to look at it from a social interchange or an anthropological perspective or a geopolitical perspective, and it's apparent that is used for some other agenda. Now, whether we know that from the history record that the intent is pejorative, however, just looking at the meaning of the word, the origin of the word, the history of the word is very...
Hold on, Todd. Hey, hold on, Todd. Brother Hank, we have the music in the background. Somebody was in the chat. Brother Hank.
Got you, bro.
All right, thank you. Yeah, somebody mentioned. All right, thank you. All right.
So it's not only what is known by any, and we gotta put things out there like it is, Abdullah. We know that people who read, so we're not talking about people who are students of readers. We're talking about anyone that has basic grammatical skills. That means any teacher from any discipline knows that the word black applied to humans is pejorative, without doubt. Whether or not they address it, that's determined through their own agenda, if you get the whole point. But the assumption that people didn't know that it's pejorative, or that it's a social engineering application to the people of Moabite Canaanite descent is inexcusable. It is only because it hasn't been taught, general etymology hasn't been taught to the general masses by social engineering design under animal husbandry particularly after 1902 and the establishment of the General Education Board with John D. Rockefeller and Frederick T. Gates. We know that there was a political agenda behind it. And not only with the time period, dealing with 1100 to 1150 in the area to about 1700, you already know, for anyone who could read, simply look at its basic etymology and know that it's pejorative without someone even making it an issue. So it's obvious that it has some nefarious sociological intent in its application, which is pejorative. Meaning, if you weren't even looking at it from any other perspective, just by knowing the etymology, it becomes obvious that it's not accidentally applied, but that it's also not properly applied or properly used. So basic, if we're dealing with basic third grade, we're not even talking about junior high school. We're not talking about elementary school. We're talking about lower elementary school, third grade level grammatication. The word black is first an adjective, so we already know it has no bio meaning. It has no bio application. Therefore, it is an objective application, and therefore it can't apply to a living human hominidae being, except as a slur or some other agenda. Now, the history will expose the agenda. However, from an etymological perspective, it's already dismissed as a proper nomen applied to hominidae or to a human. That's number one. So that's the etymology. And of course, you can expand on that. But the first thing I want to relate to that is that all people who can read already know this. And one of the violations against the people is people who have been in position of leadership or teaching, not addressing that honorably indicates their actual agenda, whether admitted or not. Now, so we know that. And is there any other part of that question that I didn't apply?
No, that was good. This was good. Yeah, this is that was good. Good answer. Good answer.
So that immediately dismisses it as any instrumentality or any literature that refers to the natural people under the black nom de guerre or brand as an ancient history is immediately lying, which is easily told without even just simply looking at it etymologically, without even having any other agenda of comprehension or understanding. And this, again, this is why people who really can read really don't excuse so-called black leaders and teachers pretending that our people are black, because they have to be pretending because they can read.
All right, so we're going to go to the next question.
And I say that to say that it's not debatable, really, although people debate it. It's sort of like somebody arguing that they have to litigate whether 1 and 1 is 2 or not based on who says it.
Now we addressed black. We addressed the word black.
Yes.
Now the next question. Why do the masses of people, and this is pretty much parts of this is in different parts of the world as well. Why do masses of people use the words white, and we already addressed black, but white, black, red, yellow, and brown for people of the human family, for the people of the family of nations?
Now this goes
/ human family.
This goes to the geopolitics and knowing the history. And so we would more or less approach some of the influence of the social engineering from, let's say, Blumenbach and Carlos Linnaeus, who's generally known as Carl Linnaeus. Carlos Linnaeus, who's usually referred to as Carl Linnaeus, but that's Carlos Linnaeus. All right. So this is where you get the phenotype operations of the race paradigm that people are mentally locked in these modern days, and that's around 1758 area, something like that. All right. And that comes from one of his books, I think the 10th edition, as you all noticed, dealing with classification of hominidae. And so they created the code, or they adopted or addressed or expanded on what was loosely used as a code system for social classification, or a caste system, the white, yellow, red type thing and stuff like that. And so when you're dealing with that too also exposes all scholars who pretending that there's ancient white history or ancient black history. Even presenting that argument by any scholar is indicative of a disqualification of their titles of scholarship that they have been claiming and putting on our people. So there's two things involved there. Either they're minion operators for the genocidal operations of Unum Sanctum, because if they have a title and they can read, that's obvious. Because if they're looking at the word black and the social engineering application, they would reject it regardless of anything else. No different than if someone knows basic math, basic arithmetic. You would not be arguing about an interpretation that 2 and 3 is 5, but because somebody else from a part of the world spoke it, it becomes 6.5 or something like that. Same thing. And so knowing that black is pejorative, then you would start looking at the socialization angle. How did this come? You would be thinking logically, how did this come about that human beings have been classified under a color system, which is in itself not natural? That's number one. So a thinker would say, where did this come from? And of course, as soon as you do research, you'd find most people would talk about Linnaeus. And so you would look at this phenotype operations of hominidae or human species, and they would call it among themselves varieties. But the general race paradigm that people use in the contemporary time has its strength origin around Linnaeus's operations of the phenotype of the human family. And so if someone's looking at the so-called race issue, even to talk about race as a subject matter in any intellectual form or any study form, you would immediately go to at least Linnaeus. And the evidence itself is there, meaning that, like anything else, if you're studying or if you have any kind of a problem, whether it's mathematical, scientific, food, biological, horticulture, you would simply look at the component parts related to the subject matter to lead you to a basis of origin, because you're still dealing with etymology. The principles of etymology still applies in general research, general scientific research. No bias, general scientific research would lead you to Linnaeus if you're talking race. And apparently, if you're dealing with 1758, you already know that whole race paradigm. If you take it beyond that, somebody's lying. So that would immediately make the being aware that they're being engineered socially with an agenda. Then you start looking at, who has this agenda? And what is this agenda tied to? What was the motivation? What's the origin? And the same principle that is applied in etymology as a rule is applied to history as a rule, because they're all tied together. And the more that you look at this stuff, you can look at almost every discipline with the principles that are applied in basic etymon study, applies in general to an analytical study of any subject matter. But since we're talking about humans, it becomes apparent that it's a socially engineered operation. So now you would start trying to go past that to find the actual origins of the Asiatics or African peoples or the European peoples. And you would deal with what you call an anthropological footnote and notification and put the pieces together. And not only would you find out the real true origin and meaning of the words that are applied to these people, you'd find out the history of how these things came about at the same time. Then you look at the timeline, then it becomes obvious that someone or some body of people thoughtfully, with an agenda, constructed a paradigm of thought or narratives to present to the masses. Then you'd have to look at what was their agenda. And of course, then you'll find the real history. And that's how you get past the reconstructed history that has been controlled, particularly in the Western Hemisphere, relative to the Asiatic people at North America that have been branded Negro, Black, or colored. And it becomes obvious even to a child that it is not only BS and it's not only intellectually negative and pejorative, but it is actually expository of a corrupted agenda of whoever is presenting it, no matter who it is. And also inexcusable, meaning if anybody can read, they can't excuse to be having been confused about any of this. And if they said they can read, or if they have a title of any teaching title and they have to be corrected, that means they're corrupt, either deliberately or they're disqualified. And that's not opinion, that's the math of the information. What you call cause and effect. Basically what's obvious. And one of the interesting things I find, Brother Abdullah, over the years is how people who have titles or have been teaching, when presented with even these questions that you've asked, will in private admit to it and then turn around and go right back out in the public venue and promote the Linnaeus paradigm as if it's valid, and then pretend to be trying to solve the so-called race problem with our people.
All right. Once again, those who are just joining us, welcome. Welcome to Moorish Monday with Abdullah El Taleb Mosi Bey on Magnus Crystal Pyramids YouTube.
There is an overwhelming focus on pointing the finger at others for why they don't acknowledge or respect our true identity. Prophet Noble Drew Ali gave a clear definition for what a true Moor is versus what a dirty Moor is. It isn't solely based on one's bloodline, but one's morals, character, and conduct. Caveat emptor from the Moorish literature states that Moors are upright, independent, and fearless. But as long as we cling to principles that delude to slavery, we aren't being our true selves, which is our higher self. Chapter 47 of the Holy Quran states, "That is why the nationality of the Moors was taken away from them in 1774, and the word Negro, Black, and Colored was given to the Asiatics of America who were of Moorish descent, because they honored not the principles of their mother and father, and strayed after the gods of Europe, of whom they knew nothing." The Prophet said that we should be learning to love instead of hate. Article 1 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights clearly states that all human beings are born free and equal. We should be respecting ourselves and each other first and foremost, and we must avoid behaving in an inhumane, cruel, and abusive manner as stated in Article 5. Finally, there is an overwhelming focus on the etymology of black. But what is the etymology of human? Kind, gentle, polite, learned, refined, civilized.